Hi, I'm Gavin Carlson, and this is Out of Bounds, Daily Bruin Sports Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Out of Bounds, the official sports podcast of the Daily Bruin. We're back. It's the first episode of the 2023-24 academic and athletic year. I'm your host, Gavin Carlson, a rising fourth-year sports staff writer here at the Daily Bruin. And I'm joined by my fantastic guest, another fellow rising fourth year, a senior sports staff writer here at the Daily Bruin, Mr. Jack Nelson. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Gavin. Great to see you after a little while. I'm super excited to be back here in the office and talk some Bruin football today.
That's right. We're going to be making our game-by-game predictions for the upcoming UCLA football season. Solid season for UCLA last year, but we'll see if they can do even better this year in 2023. Before we start, I have to address a little elephant in the room. If you're listening to this podcast, as always, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or SoundCloud, you may not realize we are actually recording live in front of 3 high-tech cameras in the UCLA Daily Bruin office here in Kirkhoff Hall. We have Zoë Busenberg behind the camera helping us make this a video production. So if you want to see the video recording of this podcast, you can go to the Daily Bruin YouTube channel. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and stay tuned because we're going to be posting all of our podcasts on the YouTube channel from here on out. But with that being said, let's jump into our predictions for the upcoming season. Like we said, UCLA, a solid season last year, 9-4. Did not finish the way the Bruins would have hoped, losing in their bowl game against Pitt, obviously losing that epic game to USC at the Rose Bowl. But a lot of intrigue with this team this year. New quarterback, that's going to be the storyline early on. As of this recording, we don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback but for UCLA. But we're going to jump into week 1. The Bruins will be at home in the Rose Bowl, likely a very hot Rose Bowl. The first game of the season always seems to be in the 90s, even the hundreds. UCLA will be hosting Coastal Carolina, who went 9-4 last season. And so, Jack, we'll start with you. Wondering the quarterback position. Dante Moore, Ethan Garbers, Colin Schlee. Who do you think is going to start? Who do you think should start for UCLA in that week 1 game?
I think it should be Dante, and if it's not Dante, I'll be very surprised. You think about how much hype there's been around Dante Moore, one of the biggest recruits in UCLA history coming in. He's got to be the man, I think, from week 1 here. And if he's not, I'd be very surprised. I think he's done enough in practice to earn the job. Still doing some work, I'm sure, with the other quarterbacks. Still competition going on right now, but I think it's got to be Dante for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should be Dante, and I do think it will be Dante. Chip Kelly's done a good job all offseason trying to, give every quarterback the chance to earn the job. Ethan Garbers looked good in that bowl game when DTR got hurt, and he's an experienced guy if you want to go that route. But I think the schedule really works out well for Dante Moore. You have 3 non-conference games against 3 teams that the Bruins will be favored against. So if Dante can sort of ease into college life, ease into playing D1 football against 3 non-Power 5 schools, and then in week 4 we'll get to Utah and we'll see how he can handle it. I think it would make a lot of sense for Dante to start from week 1. So jumping into the game, who do you got winning week 1? I assume UCLA, but see any surprises?
Yes, so I do have UCLA winning against Coastal Carolina week 1. I think it's going to be a little closer than some people might expect. I have them 34-28 final score. When you think of Coastal Carolina, first person that comes to mind for me, Grayson McCall. I was actually surprised to hear that he is still at Coastal Carolina. He's kind of like the less talented DTR over there. He's been there for so long, but he's just so entrenched in that offense. He's like the first ever player to be voted the 3 times Sun Belt Conference Player of the Year over there. Just has established so much with Coastal Carolina, and people recognize that team from the couple of great seasons they had a couple years back, a couple 10-win seasons over there. But I think ultimately Coastal Carolina may have a bit of an upper hand offensively, maybe from an experience standpoint. Like I said, McCall's very familiar with that offense. But if UCLA does end up starting Dante, they have a serious talent disparity there, I think. That's really going to work to their advantage, as well as the fact that defensively, Coastal Carolina is dealing with some major losses at the defensive line, as well as the cornerback positions. And so I think UCLA's offense can really exploit them there, and they'll be able to really come out on top in this game.
Yeah, I have UCLA as well. Just a couple more stats. Coastal Carolina, 29 points per game last season. Like you said, a really strong offense. But their defense, not so good. 32 points per game allowed last season. And, whether it's Dante, whether it's Ethan Garbers, regardless, UCLA is going to move the ball well. They always move the ball well at the Rose Bowl. And so even if it takes a few drives, a relatively new offensive line for UCLA, that's something to keep your eye on if the run game looks as strong as it did last year. But regardless, this team's going to score so many points all season, and especially against a weak Coastal Carolina defense. So I have it 38-28 UCLA. High-scoring game most likely, but UCLA, we both have them 1-0 to start the season after a non-conference schedule season opener at the Rose Bowl. Transitioning now to week 2, UCLA will be at San Diego State at a new San Diego State stadium, relatively new. San Diego State, solid season last year. Kind of this program that is always slept on. You feel like they're always creeping into the top 25, kind of in and out. They're going to have a solid team this year, a lot of new faces. But once again, we'll go to you first. I assume you've got UCLA winning this one as well.
I do, yes. Have UCLA winning this one 38-21. Just as you said with San Diego State, they're certainly not a team you want to overlook if you're Chip Kelly and this UCLA Bruins team. Just a very consistent program, 13 straight winning seasons there. Kind of somewhat infamously defeated UCLA the last time they played them over at the Rose Bowl in 2019, back when the program was really starting to rebuild and develop over at UCLA, and Chip Kelly was still doing a lot of work over there. But just looking at the San Diego State team, I mean, it was kind of interesting looking at last season when they had a defensive back also step in at quarterback, Jalen Maiden. He did inject some life into that offense, but he's definitely an errant passer, so something to be wary of there for San Diego State's offense. He's got some decent weapons, Mekhi Shaw, Raphael Williams, some good guys. But ultimately, what San Diego State's going to have to rely on if they want to keep this a close affair is going to be the defense. Defense has been really the definition of San Diego State teams for a long time now. They haven't finished below 21st in the nation in total defense since 2013. But there is a lot of turnover for them going into the season on the defensive side of the ball. And so I think that'll help UCLA and their offense really gain some momentum as they begin to get through non-conference play here going into the regular season. I do have UCLA winning this one ultimately.
Yeah, I agree. UCLA, I have it 35-27, relatively close once again. If it is Dante Moore, it'll be interesting. It'll be his first road game in college. And, sometimes people underestimate how difficult that can be. You're used to being at home in the Rose Bowl, making that nice drive over from campus. It's nice and easy. But, it's not like San Diego State's that far, but it's a different experience as a high school player versus a college player, traveling over to an opposing stadium, having to deal with fans, having to deal with maybe a different way of calling plays in the huddle, all of that. So it'll be interesting if it is Dante to see how he responds to his first road game. Just going off what you said about San Diego State, defenses are key. They allowed only 20 points a game last year, which is really, really good in college football. 7-6 last year, like you said, they've kind of been shaky recently, a lot of turnover. But I think for whatever reason, I just have a feeling it's going to be a Latu game. One of the best players in the conference, probably the best player on UCLA. I think he's probably the favorite to be Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. And for whatever reason, I just think he's going to show up big in the San Diego State game. A lot of turnover on the offensive line. I wouldn't be surprised if he records his first sack of the season if he doesn't get it against Coastal Carolina. But yeah, 35-27 for me. UCLA jump into a 2-0 start. I think most people expect that. And I think people expect UCLA to continue that in week 3 when they go back to the Rose Bowl and host NC Central. Probably the easiest game of the 3 in the non-conference slate. And probably done on purpose because, after that you have a really big game against Utah. So it'll be nice to come back home to the Rose Bowl, play NC Central, and likely get a pretty simple win. I don't think we need to waste too much time on this. The talent disparity is it's not even close, right? If it is Dante, by then he'll really be used to college football life. And I have it 38-17. I don't think it's going to be close. You probably have it even bigger, though. Let's see what you have.
I do, yeah. I have a bigger margin of victory for UCLA here. I have the Bruins winning 45-14. As you said, yeah, talent disparity is huge for this one. I mean, I will give NC Central some credit at the quarterback position. Davius Richard is one of the best passers they've had in program history. He's, I think, second all-time passing yards, touchdowns, total offense at the program. So he's certainly established a great culture there, the way he's leading that offense. But ultimately, I mean, the difference in athleticism, talent, just as you said, I think it's going to be too much for NC Central to overcome. The Bruins have this one pretty handily, I think.
Yeah, so there it is. UCLA 3-0 to start the regular season, 3 non-conference games. I think I asked people on Twitter, you ask people on campus, everyone says the same thing. UCLA is starting the season 3-0. It would be a huge disappointment if they manage to somehow lose one of those games. But now is when things really start. Week 4, UCLA traveling to Salt Lake City to take on Utah. That is going to be a massive game, just like it was last year when Utah traveled to the Rose Bowl. It's funny. It's kind of similar timing. Last season, UCLA had already beaten Washington before the Utah game. People were feeling like, okay, this UCLA team is legit. This is a little bit different. The Bruins will not have played anyone really before this game. But, based on the history of the Utah-UCLA kind of rivalry in recent years, other than last year, Utah's owned it. They've won the last 5 matchups going before that game last year. Cam Rising is back. He's one of the best players in the conference, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And I don't know about you, but I think this was where UCLA picks up its first loss. I do have UCLA. I just think you're in Salt Lake City. I think it's one of the 10 hardest places to play in all of college football. I think it's a very underrated road atmosphere, especially if it's a night game. We don't know yet. But if it's a night game on ESPN, it'll probably be a blackout. The fans will be going crazy. That place gets loud. You don't know what the weather's like, easing into the fall in Salt Lake City. I just think there's too many sort of external factors, ignoring the roster, ignoring that Utah's bringing a lot of people back, especially on offense. Just looking at some of the extracurricular sides of it, I think there's a lot going against UCLA. So I have it 31-24 Utah. Utah's defense is great. Their offense is always underrated. People think that they're just this smash mouth team that scores 14 points. This isn't Iowa, folks. Utah scores points. All right, they're in the 40s. They're in the 30s. They shut down USC twice, once in Salt Lake City. And so this is a legit team. They've been great in the Pac-12 the past few years, and they're going to do it. I think they're going to beat UCLA in week 4. What about you?
I agree with you, Gavin. I got Utah winning 24-14 this one.
Low scoring.
Yeah, low scoring one, I think. So, I mean, just as you said, like Utah is pretty much the last opponent UCLA wanted to face first game of the season in conference play. That's a really tough draw for them. And just as you said with the environment as well, like Reese Eccles is one of the toughest stadiums to play against or to play in, especially in a night setting when, of course, like the fans are roaring. It's on ESPN, all this publicity, all this coverage. And Utah, for those who don't know, has been pretty much owning the Pac-12 these past few years. They were 10-4 in 2022 and 2021. Back-to-back Rose Bowl appearances, given no wins in either of those, but also back-to-back Pac-12 champs. And so they are truly a team to beat going into the season, the Pac-12. And so I think UCLA is really going to struggle against a really tough defense, as you mentioned, in addition to the fact that Cameron Rising's probably a top 15 quarterback in college football right now, I would say. He just runs a really terrific Utah offense there that, as you said, it's very underrated, doesn't really get enough appreciation as they think they should. And Kyle Whittingham has done a really good job as head coach over there. I think the only question really for Utah is how healthy is Cameron Rising going to be? How is he going to be 100% ready to go start the season because he tore his ACL at the end of last season in the Rose Bowl against Penn State. And so if he's not 100%, then UCLA might have a chance there to really kind of get a bit of an edge, especially if they have a quarterback like Dante Moore, who at that point is maybe a little more comfortable with the offense. He feels better in that scheme. But ultimately, if UCLA wants to win this one, the defense is going to have to stand very tall against some really good tight end play, a really punishing ground game that Utah usually shapes up to have. And so, yeah, I think Utah ultimately will prove their worth as the top team of the Pac-12 in this one.
I think one other thing to point out, you talked about Cam Rising and the health. That's a huge factor. We'll see what the knee looks like. I think a lot of people underestimate the running ability of Cam Rising. He is not a pocket passer. He is very much a dual threat. He likes to run, especially in the red zone when they're down there inside the 5. Play action, roll out, run it in. Against USC, it was that 2-point conversion. He leaped over the goal line. Big physical runner. So if his knee's not 100%, that takes a big aspect of his game. I think one other thing to mention, Utah will once again open the season against Florida. That's a very difficult game. So if Utah has any issues against Florida in week 1, they're at home this year. Last year they lost in Florida, but at home against Florida. And then they go to Baylor. So their first 2 games, quite difficult. It's not like UCLA, who's got 3 cupcakes to start the season. 2 of Utah's first 3 games are very difficult. So who knows? Maybe they're 1-2. 2-1 going into that game. I don't know if that's good news or bad news for UCLA if you have an angry Utah roster, a team that plays very physical. But who knows? Maybe they're in a couple dogfights earlier in the season and their roster is already a little depleted and that helps UCLA. We'll see. But I think with both teams at full strength and if Cam Rising is healthy, I think it makes sense for both of us to have Utah. So yeah, UCLA falls to 3-1 on both of our predictions so far. We transition now to week 5. UCLA will travel back to the Rose Bowl, the comfy confines of Pasadena, California. They'll be taking on Washington State. And when everyone thinks UCLA, Washington State, they think of 2019. Believe it or not, that is the last time these 2 teams played against each other. I was amazed by that. I don't know, between COVID and just the way the Pac-12 schedule works, it's been 4 years since UCLA's played Washington State. And if you go back to that game, that's one of the most epic games in like the past 10 years of college football. UCLA comes all the way back. 9 touchdowns for Anthony Gordon, 9 touchdowns, and you lose the game. So yeah, it just had to mention that. Everyone thinks about that game in 2019. I don't think we're going to be getting 60 points from either team this time around. I don't know if that's what you're predicting, but we'll start with you. Do you have UCLA bouncing back from a Utah loss?
So let me tell you, Gavin.
Oh, no.
We have talked about the inexplicable loss for UCLA football for many years.
Oh, no.
Last year it was Arizona. The year before that, Fresno State. The year before that, Stanford. There's always a team that UCLA manages to lose against that by every other metric they should beat. And my pick for this season is Washington State.
Oh, man.
Right? So for the past 2 seasons, Washington State has been a very consistently mediocre team in the Pac-12, 7-6 in 2022 and 2021. But this offense is something UCLA will definitely want to watch out for. And I'll tell you why. It's because Washington State has brought in Ben Arbuckle, who's the former co-offensive coordinator over at Western Kentucky, which is one of the most pass-heavy offenses in all of college football. And so this passing attack at Washington State is about to get ramped up a lot and then some. And we have seen the defense for UCLA fold on multiple occasions, like entire latter half of last season, those final 4 games. Every single time defense folded in clutch scenarios, just couldn't buy a stop when their offense needed it. And I think this is one of those games where UCLA just gets exposed, not because their defense is really bad or just really porous, but the fact that it's one of those games where you just got to be careful of the opponent, and UCLA overlooks them. And I think Washington State is going to win 42-38.
Wow, that's a huge call. That's the first surprise of the episode. I do not have that happening. It makes a lot of sense. We always talk about it with UCLA. Like you said, there's always one loss that makes no sense. Last year was Arizona. I think the only reason why I don't think it happens to Washington State is because we both have them coming off a loss. I think if they're coming off a win at Utah, they're all high and mighty. They think that's usually what happens, right? It's when UCLA thinks they're at this level of being elite, and then they get humbled, right? Against Fresno State, they had just beaten LSU. There was a lot of hype. You lose to Fresno State a couple of games later. So, because we both have them losing to Utah, I think that they'll be in the right mindset to avoid that upset. But it's a great call. The Washington State offense passing game is always huge. It was huge in 2019 with the late, great Mike Leach, rest in peace. But now in 2023, you said new coaching staff, and I think there's a lot of intrigue around the program. One of the remaining Pac-4 schools, right? We'll see if there's any bad blood with that throughout the season. I doubt it. At this point, it is what it is with realignment. But I don't have UCLA losing. I have them winning and jumping to 4-1. We'll say 42-35. I think it's going to be another high-scoring game. And I still think it's going to be close. I don't think any Pac-12 games are blowouts this year. It's a very even conference, a lot of solid teams. But UCLA jumps to 4-1 for me, falls to 3-2 for Jack. So now we'll go to week 6. UCLA. This is another game that I think people have UCLA maybe losing. It's at Oregon State in Corvallis, a very new-look Oregon State team. They really surprised a lot of people last year, beating Oregon at the end of the season. And it's funny, a lot of people kind of said they did it with one hand tied behind their back maybe. Their offense, very one-dimensional. Running game, amazing. Passing game, not so good, but there's a new quarterback in town, and that defense is going to be great. We'll start with you. UCLA, I guess for you, 2 straight losses. Do they finally get back in the win column?
They do. I have UCLA getting back in that win column, and they're going to be winning 34-24 in this one by my calculations. And as you mentioned with the QB, the big story for Oregon State is that they are the ones who won the DJ Uiagalelei race, right?
Can we take a moment for that pronunciation? That was I stayed away from it. I just said new quarterback in town. He got it. Shout out to Jack. That was nice.
Appreciate it. But yeah, he's the one who's going to be leading this offense. I think a lot of people are seeing him as what Bo Nix was last year at Oregon. He has potential to do that this year. And I think you could have a really terrific quarterback battle if Dante is really established in this offense at this point and DJ is really back in his element at Oregon State after a really rough year last year at Clemson. I think you could see a great quarterback battle here. Offensively, other than that, Oregon State has a good group of running backs returning. Not really any big changes there for them. And one of the most productive offensive lines in the country as well. But it won't be too explosive, I don't think. With Uiagalelei, it's not really something that's going to be spreading the field too much, not a lot of big chunk plays, but just really about versatility for that offense. And I think defensively, from Oregon State, they had the Pac-12's top defense last season, so that was huge for them, especially in the red zone. They had the top red zone defense in the country, so that was huge for Oregon State. But they are suffering some serious losses on that front. 5 of 7 top tacklers from last year are now out of the picture, and so that defense is a lot more vulnerable, and that's where I think UCLA really comes into the picture here and is able to get the win and get back in that win column.
I agree. We're back on the same page. I have UCLA winning. I think this is a game where we're going to learn a lot about UCLA's new defensive coordinator, D'Anton Lynn. I think, like you said, Oregon State's offense, it's a little one-dimensional, even though you have a new quarterback, even though he's supposed to open up the passing game a little bit. I think it's still obviously a run-heavy team. I think DJ's going to be, there's a lot of read options, a lot of QB power. Obviously, he's going to try to spread the ball around a little bit. But I think we learned a lot about D'Anton Lynn. We're hearing rumors of him being aggressive. We've had aggressive defensive coordinators at UCLA in the past in terms of blitzing, but in terms of, defensive backs, a lot of soft coverage, a lot of one-on-one coverage yet soft. I think against Oregon State, you go up, you press, you have great corners. Devin Kirkwood's going to have a huge year for UCLA this year, in my opinion. I think if you're pressuring Oregon State's receivers, you kind of keep DJ in the pocket, you focus on the running game. I think UCLA is going to shut down Oregon State in Corvallis. This is a game that a lot of people have UCLA losing. Oregon State's like this trendy pick this year in the Pac-12 because they were good last year, because there was a new quarterback. They have a great coaching staff. I think a lot of preseason polls have them in like the 15 through 17 range. I don't see it. I've got them in the 20s. I've got UCLA right below them. And look, UCLA is not losing to Oregon State, okay? I think this is still big brother, little brother in the Pac-12. I know it's the last year of this, but there's got to be some pride at UCLA. You cannot be losing to a team like Oregon State, even if they're a great program this year or an improving program. It's UCLA. You cannot lose to the underdog. So I think UCLA's got to go out there in Corvallis, have a statement win. For me, they would jump to 5-1. For you, they'd be 4-2, if I can do math. That's correct. So either way, it's a great start to the season for both of us for UCLA. But yeah, we'll transition now to week 7. UCLA stays on the road, go over to Palo Alto, my hometown, sort of. Live about 10 minutes away from Stanford's stadium that's always empty. And so it'll probably be empty in week 7 when UCLA travels. The last UCLA-Stanford matchup officially in the Pac-12. Stanford's kind of had a rough go, to say the least. New coach in town, David Shaw resigning. The offense has been not what it used to be. It used to be this, top program, power running game. You think about the quarterbacks that are there, these 6'5" guys, they have big arms, they can run the ball, play action, tight ends everywhere. But in recent years, it just hasn't worked. It's like it feels like they're a little bit outdated in terms of college football nowadays. I have UCLA winning, keeping a solid win streak after the Utah loss. I assume you do as well. What's your score prediction for that?
I do have UCLA winning. I actually have this as their biggest win of the season. I have a bit of a blowout here. I have UCLA winning 52-10. This is going to be, I think, a big scoring one for UCLA. Wow. I'll tell you why.
Wow.
As Gavin mentioned, Stanford has really struggled these past few years in the Pac-12 after some really dominant teams early in the 2010s. I mean, they've been 3-9 these past 2 seasons, just consistently terrible and one of the worst teams in the Pac-12. They might be the Pac-12's very worst team this season. I see that probably happening. Just because with the new leadership, Troy Taylor, I mean, David Shaw stepping down is, I guess, honorable considering the way this team was going, the way it was going. I think he realized it was time for some new leadership, that things weren't working. But for Stanford, there's a lot of transfers outgoing. That's not going to help them at all. It's an absolute mess at offensive line. There's just no one there who I really see making a big impact. Also, lots of uncertainty at quarterback, running back, obviously 2 of the most critical positions for an offense trying to establish itself under a new leader. And just they were so terrible last year, and I don't see them bringing back anyone that's going to make a big difference for them this year. I don't see anything on the roster that would say otherwise. And yeah, as I said, I think this could be a real opportunity for UCLA to put up some big numbers on Stanford after a couple weird losses to Stanford, especially the one in 2020. But yeah, I think this is a big win for UCLA.
I was nervous because I have it 42-21. I thought some people were going to look at me like that was crazy. 52-10, you said?
I did.
Okay. I mean, hey, if I wouldn't be shocked. But just to add a little bit more context about UCLA versus Stanford in recent years. From 2009 to 2018, UCLA lost 11 straight matchups against Stanford. Hit dear to home for me growing up in the Bay Area and just hearing Stanford fans nonstop talk about how they would always beat UCLA 11 straight times. In recent times, UCLA's won 3 of the last 4. David Shaw obviously not there anymore, so it's a whole new picture. There's a chance David Shaw is going to be somewhere in UCLA's coaching staff. There's rumors about that this week when we're recording. But yeah, like you said, we've said it a couple times now. Stanford, not the old Stanford. So UCLA gets another win. For me, they jump to 6-1. For you, they are 4-2. No,
5-2.
I can't do math. 5-2. So very strong start. Keeping it going now to week 8. UCLA finally comes back home after, I say finally, but 2 games on the road. They'll be at the Rose Bowl hosting a very Hollywood-esque Colorado program. Gets all this buzz, primetime, Deion Sanders in the building. I've never seen so many people leave a program, so many people come into a program. Total reboot. Makes sense. They've been awful the past few years. They needed a reboot. Where do we start with this team? I don't know. They have very talented players. Travis Hunter coming in, one of the most talented players in the country. Like it's so weird. This is a team that's going to have like their 4th-string corner is going to be a high school level player, but their like starting corner is like one of the best in the country. It's like the team doesn't make sense. We'll see what Deion's son can do at quarterback. But I think UCLA is lucky to get Colorado in Week 8 when, by this point, the huge issue with the Buffaloes is their depth, right? They've got a good starting lineup, but because of all the transfers, because of everybody leaving, there's no depth. And so by Week 8, there's going to be some injuries. There's going to be some issues in terms of who's starting, who's coming off the bench, and all that. And so I think by Week 8, this Colorado team could be having some sort of downfall. I've got UCLA winning this one pretty big as well. They're at home. I just think UCLA at home they're money. For something about it recently, kind of like UCLA basketball a little bit. I have it 49-21. So I've got an even bigger win than against Stanford. I don't know. We'll see what this Deion Sanders experiment is like, but I'm not really expecting much in year one from Colorado. What about you?
I'm going a little bit of a different direction. Not that I'm saying there's going to be an upset.
Oh, I thought it was another Washington State, folks.
No, not quite yet. But I do have UCLA winning 38-35. I think it's going to be a much closer affair than some people think. Of course, as you said, this is a team that has so much hype going this season. Everyone was laughing at this team last season, 1-11, maybe the worst team in all of college football last year. And now everyone's eyes are on Colorado football, and they want to see what's going to happen with Coach Prime, what's going to happen with Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, all these hugely, really talented guys coming in with a huge influx of talent, experience that they already have in college football. Of course, Pac-12 is a whole different animal than their previous team. But I think that at the same time, with all the hype going on, there's also a lot of people aren't really realizing that this, like I said, this is a team that went 1-11 last year. Like, this team is going to have some growing pains as they start to rebuild this culture. Of course, they have the right man for the job. They have the right players coming in. But the question is, how much can they win with all that new pieces and so much leaving? Because there's virtually, especially on the defense, virtually no returners. And that's where I think it's going to hurt them the most. Of course, on offense, you're going to have, like I said, one of the best, or at least one of the most iconic duos in the Pac-12 with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter coming in, who plays cornerback and wide receiver. He did it when he previously worked for Coach Prime over at his previous team, and back here at Colorado, he'll probably be splitting two duties as well. But yeah, I think that we will see some growing pains from Colorado this season. I think they might do enough just to get a winning season. It could go really either way. I think they could be a winning team, could be a losing team. Definitely not going to be like a 1-11, like 8-4 turnaround or something like that. I don't think. I think it's going to be a lot more tame than people think. But like I said, I do have UCLA winning this one in what could be a little bit of a shootout, considering these offenses and the way they're going to be going at each other, especially with the weapons that Colorado's bringing in, with weapons that UCLA's bringing in, both through the portal. So yeah, a little closer affair than I think some people might expect.
That's fair. Yeah, I think, and just to clarify, there's nothing wrong with the hire. Prime time, I think it's great for Colorado. There was a lack of energy around the program, and obviously he got some big name transfers. It's just going to take time, all right? A football team is not 11 guys on offense and 11 guys on defense. You need a full roster, and they have the furthest thing from a full roster. It's going to take some time. Them going to the Big 12 will be really interesting. But for now, we're worried about UCLA versus Colorado. We both got UCLA winning. So if I can do this correctly, I've got UCLA at 7-1, and you've got them at 6-2. So yeah. We go to week 9. UCLA travels to Tucson. Jack's smiling already. I don't know if this is another upset for Jack. Last year, we know what happened. UCLA lost to Arizona in what was an epic game. I will say that. Being at the Rose Bowl, that was an unbelievable game, back and forth. Jaden DeLaura, I know there's some stuff around his name. We're not going to get into that. But in terms of his ability as a quarterback, I think he's really exciting. Runs around in the backfield like Kyler Murray. Kind of reminds me of Kyler a little bit. He had really good weapons last year, like really, really good. He did lose a few of those, especially Dorian Singer transferring over to USC. That's a huge loss for Arizona because it's a pretty pass-happy team. Pretty is an understatement. A very pass-happy team. Dorian Singer is a great wide receiver, a big part of that team. So losing him is going to be a big issue for them. And we'll ask Jack who he has winning this game first because, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as funny as it would be to pick UCLA to lose this one, given what happened last season, and trust me, I know, because I was in the back of the end zone when I would think it was the streaking Jake Bobo, and DTR throws a pass, and it just misses Jake Bobo's hand. I remember that. It's ingrained in my memory. That was wild. Yeah. But I do have UCLA winning this one, 31-14. I think Arizona does deserve a good bit of credit for the amount of rebuilding they've done under Jed Fish. I mean, they were 1-11 in 2021, 5-7 last season, so they certainly are on an upward trajectory here. But I think just with some of the turnover, like you said, especially on the offense, losing some of those key weapons is really going to hurt them. Of course, Jane DeLora, he fit really well into that offense last season. I see him doing the same thing this season. I mean, he's still got, I think Jacob Cowing is the wide receiver he's got coming back, so that's going to be huge for him.
Great player.
Yeah,
Great
one
player.
of their best players last season, projects to be one of their better players this season as well. So they already have a good connection going there on offense. That'll be a huge source of scoring for them. But defense was where there was a lot of concerns for Arizona last season, and the same case is going to play out, I think, this season as well. I mean, they desperately need more pressure up front, better coverage in the secondary. There's just a lot of holes there where UCLA can really make them and really hurt them. And so I think UCLA is going to attack them deep. I think it's going to be a big passing game for UCLA, kind of using Arizona's own, little magic against them a little bit here. And yeah, I think this is also a game where you could kind of see the backfield kind of come into its own a little bit. I mean, we haven't really talked about it too much yet, but there's a lot of interesting stories with UCLA backfield. Of course, you have Carson Steele and his alligator pet coming in to the UCLA offense. Yes, and then TJ Harden, of course, had a bit of a breakout against Cal last season, so we're excited to see what he does with UCLA now that he might be the number one option. We'll see if that's him or Carson Steele. And so I think there are going to be some good running options that UCLA can run in this one, and we'll see what happens. But I do think UCLA is going to win.
I was smiling, but I'm still going to pick UCLA to win. I was really, really tempted to have them lose back-to-back games. Tucson is another underestimated atmosphere, or another, people forget how difficult it is to play at Tucson when there is hype around the program. I feel like last year was a solid season for the program. There'll be some buzz around the team. The stadium will be maybe 3/4 full. But I'm calling it right now. This is the J. Michael Sturdivant breakout game. I know it's a little late in the season to have a breakout game in Week 9. I'm not saying he's not going to be great throughout the season. I think he's the most talented receiver that UCLA has had in the past 10 years. I don't think it's really that much of a debate. You talk about some of the receivers UCLA's had. I mean, Jake Bobo, love the guy. He's in the NFL, just caught a touchdown for the Seahawks in the preseason. You think about, Kyle Phillips, solid slot guy. These are, productive players in recent times, even going back to like Jordan Lasley, Thomas Duarte at kind of this tight end, Jordan Payton. There's been good guys at UCLA in the receiving corps, but J. Michael Sturdivant, he's different, man. He's different. He's tall, he's lanky, he's strong still, he's quick. He played well for Cal against UCLA last season, but his game against Oregon, if you watch some of the catches he made for Cal in that game, it kind of showed why he was a very attractive player to get in the transfer portal. So I think him coming over from Cal, very talented receiver. You talked about Arizona being weak in the secondary. I think this is the game where he just explodes. I'm talking like 200 yards type of game. And I think that'll be enough. I have another very, very, very high-scoring game. All this talk about D'Anton Lynn, the new defensive coordinator, we'll see what he does in this game, because this was a game last year that people wanted the former defensive coordinator, the defensive staff out after that Arizona loss. So we'll see if D'Anton Lynn can do better. But I've got UCLA 42-35. So, I mean, they just keep winning in my schedule. 8-1 for me, 7-2 for you. So, very strong season. Week 10, we'll speed it up a little bit. Arizona State, back to the Rose Bowl, hosting a new coach for Arizona State, and Kenny Dillingham coming over was the offensive coordinator at Oregon. Many give him a lot of credit for sort of helping Bo Nix break out and finally have that Bo Nix season that people have been waiting for with the Oregon Ducks. But now he's the head coach of Arizona State. And this is the game I have UCLA losing. It's a crazy call. I know. I don't know. I just think 8-1, especially if it's Dante Moore, the talk is going to be crazy around this team. We all say that UCLA has that one game that they lose, and I just think it's so coin toss. Like, UCLA is a way better team than Arizona State, like way better. But I was in Tempe last year. UCLA blew the Sun Devils out in the first half. They got a little bit cocky. Arizona State came all the way back and almost won that game. Arguably should have won that game. And so I think if there's a little bit too much buzz around this team, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the game that the Bruins lose. I literally walked into this building today 50-50 on if I had them winning, and we'll make it interesting. I say UCLA loses to Arizona State. We'll say 42-32. A tough loss for UCLA for sure on my end, but I'm sure you don't have the same.
Well, Gavin, believe it or not, we are on the same wavelength, because I have Arizona State winning this one too. I have them winning
unbelievable.
40-28. Believe it or not, I had it written this morning before you even came to the office. I'll tell you why.
That's unbelievable.
It's pretty crazy, right? Yeah. And so, but I think even going back to last season and before last season, as you mentioned, last season, it was a little bit of a scare for the Bruins there. They were up so big on Arizona State and just got so cocky, as you said. And clearly Arizona State had scoring at will in that game in the second half. But before that, in 2021, last time, Sun Devils were at the Rose Bowl, throttled the Bruins. I can't remember the score exactly, but it was not close. I was there for that. I remember that game. Arizona State historically has played well at the Rose Bowl, from what I've seen. And so I think one thing to keep an eye on with Arizona State is their quarterback race. They've got a couple of good candidates going on there. I think Trenton Bourget from last season got some good stability there. He should flash some talent a little bit. They also have Drew Pine coming in from Notre Dame. He's got some talent, as well as the big-time recruit, Jaden Rashada, who was formerly Miami recruit, I believe, one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the class of 2023. Yeah. So they've got some exciting options there at quarterback. I think if one of those 3 guys kind of stands out early in the season, they stick with him, and he really gets comfortable in that offense, then they can really scare this Bruins team, I think, at Rose Bowl and ultimately pull off the upset.
That's possible. That's why I did not see that coming at all. You know, when he pulled out the Washington State, we all joke UCLA has to have that one game that no one expects them to lose, but he has 2, Washington State and Arizona State, both at the Rose Bowl too. That's pretty. 2 losses to 2 bottom half teams in the conference. If that happens, heads will roll in Westwood. That would be crazy. That's a crazy call from you. I have UCLA at 8-2 at this point. You have them at 7-3, which is, it's still respectable. We transition out of the big dog, USC, at the Coliseum, Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams. We know what happened last year at the Rose Bowl, back and forth, DTR, very hot, very cold, interceptions, epic touchdowns, Zach Charbonnet, Kaz Allen, all that good stuff. We'll go to you first. UCLA, do they overcome a loss to Arizona State to beat USC at the Coliseum?
This is the big one, isn't it?
Yes.
This is the big one. This is the one that UCLA fans will have circled on the calendar.
Of course.
The entire year. They're waiting for it.
Every year.
And it finally arrives.
The last one in the Pac-12 as well. I know that the rivalry will, of course, live on in the Big Ten, but it's the last Pac-12 USC-UCLA game.
It's historic. It'll be a big night for the conference. There'll be a lot riding on this for both teams probably at this point in the season. And I have USC winning 38-31 in another close affair. I will say that game I went to last season was one of the best college football games I've ever seen, ever. Like, it was a shootout, but it was thrilling. It was entertaining, crushing for UCLA fans, thrilling for USC fans. It was almost sold out the Rose Bowl. I think it might have been sold out, actually.
I mean, an asterisk sellout. Because
they
did have the banners still covering half the stadium, which don't get me started with that. They could have filled the Rose Bowl, okay? They could have filled all 90,000 plus seats.
They definitely could have.
I don't know what UCLA was thinking with that, but yes, it was still sold out in that regard.
But yeah, and just, I guess, moving into this season, I mean, we've talked about Caleb Williams. I mean, everyone's talked about Caleb Williams. He's the best player in college football. There's no question. He's going to be the same guy this year. I don't see anything changing. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, he's losing Jordan Addison to the NFL, Travis Dye as well. So those are 2 big losses for him, obviously. But, I mean, when you have a guy like Caleb Williams in that offense who's just such a good player and so much talent, and it doesn't really matter who you put around that guy. He's going to find ways to succeed. He's going to find ways to put up numbers. And he definitely will this season. I think he has a chance to be a back-to-back Heisman winner. It's possible. I could see it happening, barring some emerging quarterback or a really good season from somewhere else. But I think that definitely Caleb Williams is ultimately going to be a little too much for this UCLA team in what would be hopefully a thrilling game, because the last rivalry game, as you said in the Pac-12, should be a great one.
Yeah. Put the camera on me. We have cameras now, so we can do this. Look at me.
Here we go.
Look at me. UCLA's losing. I'm sorry. Caleb Williams he's amazing. I've been made fun of in this office so many times for how much I praise Caleb Williams while standing on UCLA's campus, but I'm sorry. He is Patrick Mahomes 2.0. Not 2.0. He's not better than Patrick Mahomes. He's the college Patrick Mahomes. Enough of the Drake May is great. Jordan Travis at Florida State, they're going to surprise a lot of people. All right, we'll see what happens with Sam Hartman at Notre Dame. Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in the country. It's not close. People can't throw like him, all right? 80 yards down the field, on the run, running out. Come on. Don't waste your time. UCLA, they're going to be great this year. The defense is going to be better. It's going to be a great matchup if it's Dante Moore versus Caleb Williams. The athleticism in that game, the playmaking in that game is going to be entertaining. But it's Caleb Williams. I don't think USC is losing more than one game this season. A lot of people will be mad at me for saying this, but USC is a fantastic team. They're finally getting a little bit better in terms of their depth defensively. The transfer, like I said, of Dorian Singer from Arizona to the USC receiving corps. They also in addition to him, I think Mario Williams is going to have a better year this year. He came over from Oklahoma last year and kind of had a shaky year. I think he's going to be good replacing Jordan Addison. The offense is too much. I've got it. I feel like I've said this score 20 times. 49-42, USC beats UCLA at the Coliseum. So for me, UCLA falls to 8-3. For you, it's 7-4, which that would be a big problem, 7-4. But we got one more game. It's Cal. A lot of people in the UCLA and Cal atmosphere, whatever you want to call it, Twitter especially, are going to circle this game just because of how much these schools suddenly hate each other. With UCLA leaving the Pac-12, the whole UC Regents thing, UCLA now giving Cal charity money because why? I don't know. But we'll keep it simple. Cal's not good. They're really bad. When Colorado was the worst team in the country last year, who's the only team they beat? Cal. All right, Cal, they're not it. It's at the Rose Bowl. Cal's not going to do anything to UCLA at the Rose Bowl, especially if UCLA is coming off a loss to USC, especially if UCLA is coming off 2 losses in a row like we both have, Arizona State and USC. No chance that they lose 3 in a row to Cal. Do you have anything to add? I mean, UCLA is winning this game, right?
Yeah, I have them winning. I mean, if they lose this, it'll be a disaster of a season for the Bruins, at least by my calculations. It would be 7-5 at that point. That'd be lower than the floor that I think many people have set for the Bruins for this season. But yeah, I have them winning 24-10. I think it's gonna be closer than it should be. I mean, we know how the game went last season. They went to Cal and they just kind of played against themselves the entire game essentially. I mean, Cal, as you said, it's not a good team. They're not any better this season. And they'll have turnover at the quarterback position. I mean, Jake Plummer's gone. I think they have Sam Jackson from TCU coming in. So, I mean, he might inject a little bit of excitement for the fan base, but like Cal football is dying. It has been for some time now. And this will be a little cherry on top for UCLA fans to be like, all right, we are, definitively better than Cal. So we head to the Big Ten and they figure out what the heck they're doing with their football program. So.
Yeah, who knows? They might be preparing for a little Mountain West trip after that loss. But yeah, that'll do it. I guess for me, that has UCLA at 9-3, which that's kind of the number I had months ago. I think that's the most common number that people are predicting, 9 wins for UCLA. They can make it 10 if they get a bowl game win. That would be their first 10-win season since 2014. You would have them at 8-4, right? I mean, if they're 8-4, is that a successful season for UCLA or no?
I don't think so. I mean, especially with what you said about the whole, 9-3, and a lot of people are tossing around 10-2 too. Like that's a very realistic possibility. Some games go their way. I mean, obviously, the game against USC is going to be critical, and some other games against Utah, of course, opening the season conference play against Utah is also going to be critical. So it's going to be about how they set the tone going to conference play, and if they can continue that. And I think 8-4 if they get off on the wrong foot and maybe string some wins together, I think here and there. But if they still are the same kind of UCLA team that will give up a weird loss in the middle of the season, maybe even 2 by my calculations, then I think 8-4 is a very realistic possibility.
All right, well, there you have it, 8-4. Oh, wait, we didn't give scores. What's the Cal score?
24-10, I did.
Oh, you got it 24-10. Okay, I don't have it that close. That's interesting. I have it 34-14. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be close. But, all right, now that we've done it, there should be a graphic on the screen, something like that, hopefully, with our final predictions for the season. 8-4 for Jack, 9-3 for me. Respectable for sure for UCLA in their last season in the Pac-12. But, yeah, that'll do it for our first episode of the season. Football is coming up. We've got a game in less than a month. So make sure you're staying locked with everything Daily Bruin. You can follow Jack on his Twitter. We'll have it linked in the YouTube description, mine as well. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we're going to have a great year here, so make sure you guys stay tuned. Thank you. Out of Bounds is brought to you by the Daily Bruin, UCLA's student-run newspaper. You can listen to this episode and others on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts, and a transcript will be available at dailybruin.com. Also, check out the YouTube channel Daily Bruin.